How exactly did it happen so that two agents got the same assignment? Well, he was doing an elimination job in a town in the neighbor province. He was sent to do in 3 barons who had been repeatedly charged with banditry, racketeering, and assassination of high-ranking people. These people would have never reformed or repented. They were even publicly declaring that they were above the law and no one could harm them. They didn't even put them in jail anymore. They didn't even arrest them anymore. Every other day, people talked about their crimes. The last one was this. One of the 3 barons had too many drinks and dismembered a girl. He was impudent enough to stand in the middle of the town square and say that he could do whatever he liked in that state. Well, it was all true, but was it necessary to rub it in the faces of the high-ranking people? Everyone in the county had had it with those 3. Every time one of the 3 went into a bar, most of the patrons left right away. Every other street vendor had to pay them for protection. Such irony! The law enforcement was powerless. The 3 had friends in very high places. Someone went as far as to suggest they were distant cousins of the king himself. The agency landed a state order to eliminate those 3. It was a serious order, heavily financed. The king had to be kept in the dark regarding the agency's involvement. And by the way, it wasn't the first time the agency got a state order like that. But what can you do? People are prone to violence, and sometimes only counter-violence can stop them. The same rule applied to the king, who was used to the idea of being above all else. So they sent him. Those 3 had already killed a couple of agents, but he could take them down. The agency had taken it personally this time. The 3 went by the nickname, the 3 Little Pigs. The resemblance was striking. They even grunted when they ate. They lived in the same neighborhood with their houses nearly adjacent. That was all for the best, because he was planning to eliminate them in one day. And not only that, he was planning to eliminate them in public, leaving a message for all their followers and co-workers. It's essential for any decent execution to know the target well. He had their home addresses and their entire daily schedules. He did it on Saturday morning. Why not during the night, you might ask, since it's so much quieter and still? Well, as I've already said, he wanted all their buddies to know about it and tremble with fear. He wanted everybody to see it. He had some very special skills up his sleeve. Since the 3 Little Pigs were filthy rich because of the racketeering and the outright road plundering, they could afford to have protection. Their bodyguards were always around them, and their families armed with muskets, guns, and swords. When they weren't busy protecting their masters, they usually plundered the interstate roads together. Therefore, killing people was something completely normal for them. They were ruthless, and were even suspected of murdering police officers. Unfortunately, they had an alibi which held in court. What a court it was indeed. Put it shortly, it wasn't safe even to pass by the houses of the pigs. The fat bastards felt completely safe at home. They had built real fortresses with high, thick stone walls and all. And that's where they got it wrong. They used gunpowder for their muskets when they attacked the helpless merchants and travelers in the forests. But it didn't cross their minds that the same gunpowder could easily level their fortresses down and bury them among the ruins. Well, he figured this one out. He disguised as a messenger and got a large cart full of gunpowder. He urged it on to the first Little Pig's house. He knew that the 3 gathered every Friday night to drink until they pass out. That was all he needed. He halted in front of the fortress and slammed the heavy iron door clapper. After a while, a single guard opened the door, still a bit hungover from last night. When he saw the messenger standing all alone, surprised by his courage and impertinence, he asked him, "What do you want?" "I am bringing a gift for the master," he bowed low. "What kind of gift?" the 2-legged brute articulated with difficulty. "A present from Sir Chevalier," he bowed again. Sir Chevalier was a noble from the neighboring county. He and the first Little Pig didn't get along at all. They hated each other, openly and fiercely. Last month, the first little pig cut his ear off in a tavern brawl, and now Chevalier was sending him a gift. The guard sobered up in a second. What? A gift from Chevalier? Yes, he bowed for the third time. The guard dashed forward and uncovered the cart's tilt. It was full of golden cutlery, forks, spoons, plates, as well as large sealed pitchers with select wines. The guard's eyes bulged. He waved him to run the cart inside and darted off to fetch his master. So he parked the cart in the yard's right corner next to the fortress's wall. He'd been watching the wall closely during the past week. Beneath and across this same corner, the waste drain went through, flowing into the small river further down. That was the weakest spot. They hadn't renovated anything, probably since they had the wall built. It took years of water and current. He nodded with satisfaction and waited. 10 minutes passed, and the first and second little pigs appeared. They were both still drunk from last night. They came closer and stared dully at the cart with gifts. One of them glanced at him dim-eyed, but since he was just a meaningless carrier, he was unworthy of any attention. Meanwhile, he was just standing humbly with his back slouched, as if going to bow any second with servility. The two pigs went to the cart and started browsing the golden objects. He was waiting patiently. In the confusion, they didn't even search him for weapons. Now the first pig, though still drunk, decided to taste the wine. That Chevalier dude must be really generous, he grumbled while uncorking the pitcher. I'm going to cut his other ear, too. Then we'll have a real feast. He laughed at his own joke. The second pig joined in with a loud voice. Gather round, y'all, he shouted. Come, come, it's Sir Chevalier's treat. The bodyguards rushed forward, almost knocking him down. He was just standing completely still and waiting. The crowd around the cart numbered 30 people or so, and more were coming out of the 3-story monster of a house. Finally, the first pig uncorked the pitcher, and still only surprised and not frightened, exclaimed, Hey, what the? It's gunpowder! A second later, he gathered his senses and turned to him in horror. He was pointing a gun at the cart. The safety was off. His face was cold and expressionless. Your earthly path ends today. Repent for all the murders, plunders, and evil things you've done. Be prepared to meet your maker. The second pig tried to say something. He pulled the trigger and hit one of the pitchers in the cart. It exploded and detonated all the others. The fireworks were spectacular. The golden objects turned to shrapnels, which whizzed in the air and killed everyone around. Lying on the ground, he was watching everything. His judgment was right on the mark. The blast had loosened the wall of the fortress. A few stones literally flew and fell into the field nearby. In a second of hesitation, the enormous stone wall leaned forward and slowly, grotesquely, as if in a slow motion, collapsed onto the two dead pigs and their thugs. There were 50 people or so in the yard, but they were confounded with fear. He quietly grabbed a saddled horse by the rein, mounted, and galloped away. He couldn't finish the third pig off, but it was too dangerous to stay and finish the job. Big deal, he'd get him later. Later that evening, while he was sitting in a tavern, a messenger approached him and handed him a letter. It said he had to go to that forest. He sat quietly for a moment, staring at the letter. Then he decided it was time to leave the agency and the business in general. He should just take her and get the hell out of everything. Only, how could he possibly tell her? How could he warn her? How to coordinate their doings? The messenger was sitting across the table and waiting. He nodded at the boy, took some writing paper and a pen, and wrote 2 letters. The first was a report to the agency. He was under strict orders to write in code, so if someone read the letter, they wouldn't understand its content. And the second letter, it was addressed to his mother. He was just calming her down, saying he was safe and would soon return home. He only had to stop by and see an old friend, a hunter in a distant county. He promised to bring her a present from the county's club of reputable women. He had once heard they had an exceptional choir and wrote eloquent poems. He finished the letter with love and kisses. That was all. The messenger boy read the 2 letters very carefully and put them away with a nod. He remained at the table, deeply immersed in his thoughts. He wasn't worried. He had been on plenty of difficult and dangerous missions. It was no accident that in their circle he was known as the Wolf. And if he had to die, then so be it. He had to die someday anyway. Mother received the letter, thanked the mailman, and closed the door. She read it thoroughly. Having no time to waste, she sat down and wrote another letter. The mail coach was due tomorrow. And how did she get the assignment? It was far more trivial. It seemed the agency had forgotten about her for the past couple of months. That was fine, since she had more time to spend with her parents. She wasn't worried that they might find out what her occupation was. She was so good at pretending that nobody could suspect anything. It was just that during the past week she had this strange feeling in her stomach, and her intuition was always right. The last time she had experienced this feeling was last autumn, when she had a secret night walk to the neighboring county. There she quickly revealed the truth about the night adventures of the 7 daughters of a local wealthy man. She discovered the truth by their worn-out shoes. The girls had lovers in a near estate and used to visit them every night. Their father was a blunt-witted redneck who had set his mind on marrying his daughters to some wealthy local heirs, thus seizing more land and power. He might have been a real man once, but now he had turned into an abacus. She traced the daughters. Then some beast from the forest jumped her, so she had to use the long knife. Her bodyguards, appointed by the father, didn't even react. That was when the special feeling in her stomach saved her life. The job was not commissioned by the agency, yet it was well paid. Well, 3 weeks later, a representative of the agency came along, demanding an explanation and a detailed report. She justified herself with the lack of money. She couldn't rely on Mom and Dad to take care of her at that age, right? The agency representative took her report with him and came back with an answer a week later. She was forbidden to take up freelance work. They said she might fall into the public's radar. So she obeyed. But this order? Well, she was coming back from her granny's house and decided to stop by the market in the center of the village. There she was approached by a young match girl. She was carrying a tiny stall wrapped around her neck with a string. The girl said, "These are troubled times. The country's unstable. Would you like some matches?" That was a password. She glanced at the little match girl, then reached for the matchboxes, and the girl pointed her hand to a particular box. Then the match girl nodded and turned around. She headed for the market. It was on her way back through the forest when she finally did open the box and read the assignment. She sat down to think for a while. It was high time to leave the agency. If they offered her such an assignment, it meant they had decided to dispose of all 3 of them. Today was the day. Everything would be decided today. All 3 of them knew they were being followed and closely watched. They suspected everybody.